What's up, guys? It has been a minute since we last posted on this channel about the Saw franchise, and that's kind of a little bit disappointing because, obviously Spiral has been released. It's come, it's gone. We have it on VOD if you want to go watch it right now and come back to listen to this video, or you can just wait for the Blu-ray or 4K release that's coming out on July 20th. Guys, we are like less than a month away from the date that I'm recording this video to the point that we're going to be getting the Spiral home release. Talk about turnaround time, for God's sakes. And I know I've been talking about this on Twitter, on other videos and everything. We're going to be talking about the success of this film, whether or not it was a success, in another video. But today we're going to be talking, just generally speaking, about the future of the franchise and what, if anything, you can do to do a sequel to Spiral. So I feel like I've made my opinion pretty clear when it comes to Spiral. Didn't really like the film for what it was. Not to say that it didn't have some redeeming qualities. In fact, at this point, I've seen it about 3 times, and I have to say, with each individual viewing, I tend to like it a little bit better. Like, I understand what they were trying to do, even though I feel like the initial pitch of the idea should have turned off the producers. Like, literally everything that we know about this movie, everything that we've learned about its creation ever since its release, at least to me, seems to suggest that nobody behind the scenes, besides maybe Chris Rock, was overly passionate about the pitch that this movie initially was. And that's not a dig at anybody or any creative decision or anything that went into the creation of this movie. It's just that everything about this movie smells like, well, we have big name stars who want to be a part of this film. Let's just give them all the money that we think it's worth and let them do whatever they think is right. One of the things that came out about the creation of this movie is that Chris Rock was a huge fan of the series ever since the very first one, although what does that mean? I mean, I obviously know that he's not going to be one of us, you or me or anybody else who's listening to this, who went on, the House of Jigsaw forum back in the early 2000s just to give our thoughts and opinions, our theories about what was going to happen in the next sequel. He wasn't one of those guys. Not that you have to be one of those fans in order to create anything within a universe. In fact, that could be just as crippling to an idea as, somebody who has no idea what's going on in the entire series. But regardless, it's just that he has enough clout in the industry to talk people up. That's one of the things that we've learned, is that the way he pitched this idea and why they scrapped everything that they were going to do after Jigsaw was because Chris Rock ran into somebody from Lionsgate at a wedding and was like, hey, I have this really good idea. I know that you are behind this franchise, so, get me a meeting with them. And everything that they were working on before that, they threw it out. They were like, take this guy's call. He really wants to be a part of this. Hear him out. Make his pitch work. And then we have Josh Stolberg, of all people, who, love him or hate him. I know a lot of people do not like the last 2 iterations of this franchise. And I think both of those arguments are fair. But there's also a lot of people who think there's a lot of merit in Jigsaw or even Spiral. Spiral has some of the best fan reviews that I've ever seen from people who are just as invested, or if not more so invested than I am. Of course, there are also people who are way more invested than I am, who are downright distraught with the fact that this franchise decided to go in this direction. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The point is that Josh Stolberg talked to Bloody Disgusting a couple of weeks ago, talking about how, well, he came in, he didn't have much of an idea. That's the takeaway I got from that interview. Like, what if I was in a trap? Wouldn't that be crazy? What is the story behind that? And then they just essentially came up with the best possible story they could off the fact that this guy was a fanboy who wanted to make his own version of the Saw film. And that's fine. I'm not overly mad about that. It's just that the producers have been talking about over the last couple of years that, my God, we do the procedural element stuff so much. We need to get away from police officers. And somehow it seems like that they were trying to do that with this prequel idea that they were going to do. I mean, Josh Stolberg, every time he talks about it, says, this movie is pure John Kramer. But everything that's come out around it and everything that I talked about, everything I was hearing before Spiral became a thing, was that the sequel or continuation of Jigsaw was supposed to be a prequel. Now, the producers are even talking about that. Like, it's going to be a prequel. They still want to do this story that they came up with because they really liked it, where it's going to take place between Saw 1 and Saw 2, or Saw 2 and Saw 3, or, jump around the timeline or whatever, but primarily focus on John, potentially bring in Amanda, Hoffman, Logan, maybe even Dr. Gordon, and trying its best to weave in all of this legacy storylines that I think big fans such as myself would eat up. Like, I was really genuinely excited about this movie that I was hearing about before they decided to throw everything out the door and go on with Spiral. And that was one of the reasons I was concerned with the direction of the franchise, because I didn't want them to throw everything away when we could have gotten this great connect everything, not really advancing the story type of storyline. You can go back and figure out a way to answer all the lingering questions from Saw 3D. You can give more context to everything that was established in Jigsaw, and you can set up a genuine conclusion of the entire series for the 10th film, completing this trilogy and figuring out a way to potentially spin it off from there into something like Spiral. That, to me, was what I wanted. It's not exactly what we got, at least at this point. Maybe with the theorized television show or them doing that prequel movie sometime down the line, who knows? It just feels like we've wasted time getting here. And that's kind of, the roundabout way of saying, I don't even really know where you go from here. People have been talking about doing Saw 9. They've been talking about doing Spiral 2 or anything of the like for, the last couple of months now. And I have to say, I don't understand what you can do with Spiral after this movie. It's also not to say that I don't have ideas for how to use these characters going forward. It's just the concept of Spiral, the events that led up to the story that occurred, and the motivation for why it all happened seems rather limiting to any follow-up story that they could potentially tell. If you've gotten this far into the video, I'm going to assume that spoilers are okay, especially with the ease of getting this movie if you really wanted to see it up until this point, especially in the United States. I realize that some people outside of the United States haven't gotten the chance to see it, so I am giving you a decent spoiler warning here, so be warned. By the end of the movie, it seems like William is just going to get away, and I guess it's plausible to sit there and assert that Zeke is going to be put under arrest, or at least they're going to believe that Marcus was the one doing all of this, considering the fact that nobody knew where he was during all of this. There's the police phone call, considering that one guy is walking around shooting guns all over the soap factory, and the fact that the SWAT team literally came at him, he pointed a gun at them, and they shot him dead. There's nobody left besides Zeke who can tell them that William was the one doing all this, but everything they know about William isn't real, and, he got away with it. They think he's dead. Like, that all makes kind of sense until you remember the fact that Zeke knows who he was, considering the fact that there has to be files on his dad somewhere. So it's not like William can just disappear into the ether and they have no idea who he was or where he lived his life for the last couple of years. So I guess if they wanted to go that route, it can be a Manhunt sequel, and we can do something akin to Saw 2 with Spiral 2, where they find William and he just has everything planned out. But I think that would be a little bit disingenuous for his character. This guy is not Jigsaw. And I feel like the movie does its part to kind of showcase that. Jumping off all of that is the concept around the Spiral insignia as a whole, considering the fact that William wanted to reform the police and not much else. I mean, he even says point blank to Zeke during the events of Spiral that, hey, John Kramer had the right idea. Spiral, it's new beginnings or whatever. We're going to reform the police one trap at a time, right? And the idea of following that path for a sequel to me just kind of feels a little bit Like, we've been here, we've done this. The producers even know that we have run this concept into the ground, and there's no reason to go back to the well of more and more cops. And that's why it's kind of a bummer that Zeke and William and all these other people that are tied to this new philosophy and this new story are cops. Like, seriously, we are never going to get past that formula, are we? I guess it is possible that we get a bit of a time skip between Spiral and Spiral 2. William has a little bit of delusions of grandeur, and he feels like he can reform everything. And I guess his message kind of spreads out. Instead of cops, we're doing other, bad entities, other bad things. We get into politics or something. Who really knows? But from where we left it off with the ending of this movie, it feels like there's not that much more room to grow and express these characters in ways that are genuinely interesting. And that's kind of where I start to feel like a little bit of a broken record. Say what you want about Jigsaw, but even just the general promise of exploring characters like Eleanor, who are just fanboys and girls of Jigsaw's legacy, is a little bit more interesting than just somebody being a copycat because he can. And look, guys, by no means is this video just supposed to knock all over Spiral. As I've said on Twitter a lot, despite my initial review, I've watched the movie several times now, and I feel like every single time I seemingly like it a little bit more. As I said at the very beginning of the video, we're going to be getting the home release on July 20th, and I can't wait to sit down and listen to the commentary track because there are genuine questions I really want to know about this, even though, except for everything suggests that it's just going to be another producer's commentary, and we're not going to have one with Samuel L. Jackson or Chris Rock or Stolberg or anybody else, right? Just the producers sitting around talking about how much they love the franchise and love this idea and all this kind of self-stroking that they do every single time. Not to say there won't be anything interesting. In fact, I'm just kind of reminiscing about the days that we used to get some crazy special features, not just from the Saw home releases, but literally everything. I mean, the industry has changed so much. No respect for home releases at this point. Just absolutely none. Anyway, guys, one of the reasons I was making this video is because, one, I just wanted to have a little bit more conversations about Spiral because it has been a while, but also I want to hear your pitches for what Spiral 2 could even be if they decide to make it. Seriously, I've been racking my brains, and I have a whole lot of ideas that I would like to see from just this universe. Even just new stories that are completely separate from the 9 films that we have, but using these particular characters again and trying to figure out another reason to bring them back and weave them into the overall story, I just don't really see it happening. But I want to hear your thoughts and opinions. Tell me in the comment section below. It's been real.